From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN 10 o'clock news.
Good evening, I'm Russ Riesinger. Thanks for joining us for the MTN 10 o'clock news on Q2. We begin tonight with breaking news of a large fire that has damaged or destroyed multiple buildings in the town of GARDINER on the entrance to Yellowstone National Park. Braden Raisler shot this video late this afternoon. Multiple fire crews and first responders on the scene there. We've not been able to talk to officials yet, but Braden tells us it's believed that fire first started in the back room of the Two-Bit Saloon and blew up from there. He says the Yellowstone Raft Company is in the same building and was the first to go. He then watched it go to Rosie's Bistro and Rosie's Pizzeria, which caught fire along the road that's closest to the park boundary, and then the Blue Goose Saloon. He says the pharmacy also appears to be damaged. We'll bring you more information on this just as soon as we get it. Meanwhile, back here in Billings, the east and westbound lanes of Broadwater Avenue are closed at the intersection of 8th Street West after a two-vehicle crash involving a motorcycle and a car. That crash happening shortly before 9 tonight. According to Billings Police Sergeant Brett Becker, a man was riding a motorcycle and was transported to the hospital with serious injuries. Witnesses told police they saw the motorcyclist traveling westbound on Broadwater at a high rate of speed. The motorcyclist struck a sedan while his driver was trying to turn left off of Broadwater onto 8th. Now, due to the nature of the motorcyclist injuries, police will have that intersection blocked off for the next several hours, and they're asking the public to avoid that area. Vehicles lined up outside the Shrine Auditorium this morning for free COVID-19 testing. Riverstone Health reports 237 people were tested today, but because of staffing capacity, only 175 tests will be available each day moving forward. Today, 80 people with symptoms were tested and 157 people who are asymptomatic. Testing will continue Monday through Friday at the Shrine for the foreseeable future. Now, this comes as 2 more deaths are reported here in Yellowstone County, but this time from 2 separate long-term care facilities. Riverstone Health reports another woman in her 80s died yesterday due to the outbreak at Canyon Creek Memory Care. She's the 8th Canyon Creek resident to die since a week ago Monday. The other Montana death reported today, also a woman in her 80s who lived at Morningstar Senior Living in Billings. She passed away on Sunday. Now, to date, across Yellowstone County, 13 people have died from issues related to COVID-19. The county reports another 32 positive cases today. That's about a third of the state's confirmed 109 new cases today. Also, Webo and Stillwater counties, each in the Q2 viewing area, report their first confirmed cases. There are just under 1,000 active cases across Montana and now 34 deaths. And tonight we have learned of 8 active COVID-19 cases in the Billings Men's Pre-Release Center. The first case was identified over the 4th of July weekend in the Men's Alpha House Pre-Release Center. Alternative CEO David Armstrong tells Q2 that 4 additional cases were identified last Thursday after 300 staff and inmates were given surveillance testing. The 3 other cases in the facility came to light from symptomatic testing of inmates. Under guidance from local health officials, Alternative's inmates have been kept in their rooms and not allowed to go to work since the holiday weekend. Armstrong tells Q2 there are no active cases in the Women's Pre-Release Center, while the active men's cases are roomed together with access to their own bathrooms. Well, have you checked your 401k balance lately? You may be nervous after the big drop we saw when the pandemic started, but stocks have somehow managed to make quite a comeback despite economic hardships and fears about what might lie ahead. What's driving the gains and will they last? That's something I talked to Gary Buchanan of Buchanan Capital about.
There was a lot to cheer about on Wall Street as the Dow Jones Industrial Average surged 557 points Tuesday.
We've had a big day in the stock market. Things are coming back, and they're coming back very rapidly.
The Dow is still down about 10% from its high for the year, but has gained back nearly 8,500 points since March 23rd, when it spiraled to its low over fears of the growing pandemic.
The Federal Reserve has really helped. They've stepped up in ways beyond 2008 and 2009. And so we have come back. And then, of course, anytime we have any good news, and there's some more today after the market on vaccines, the market's always looking ahead about 6 months. So it can get pretty optimistic when we start to have some good news on either a vaccine or therapeutics.
The encouraging news coming from the Phase 1 trial of an experimental vaccine by Moderna that showed it was safe and provoked immune responses in all of the volunteers who took part. Tech stocks that help us work from home have also zoomed during the pandemic. Still, there's a big difference in what's happening on Wall Street and what's happening on Main Street. Unemployment is in double digits. Many businesses may close their doors for good, and some states are now going back to restrictions as more people contract the virus.
The market is way ahead of the economy. The economy is in not as good a shape as the market. And the question is, will the market start to reflect more of the realities? Well, we're not out of the woods. I expect a lot more volatility. I would definitely, if you're an investor, keep your seatbelt fastened.
All right, turning to Chief Forecaster Bob McGuire. And Bob, you did a little investigative reporting today.
A little bit today. Sometimes people will call and say, the reported temperature was vastly different than what it says at my house. And there's a reason for that. Part of the reason is that, the air is not all uniform in one spot. So we have different places where you have different types of temperature. But here's another reason. Here's a typical house right here. And there's your thermometer. We'll move this up and you can see there's the official reading. Sometimes the one at the house will be like 97 degrees, while the official reading is maybe 89 degrees. Well, here's what happens. Well, with the one at your house, it's sometimes going to be in direct sunlight. Well, the one that's the official reading is always shaded. Meanwhile, dark colors can absorb more heat, like the color of the house, while the box that the thermometer's in the official reading is in a white box. It's always painted white, and that reduces heat absorption. And one other thing, the nearby houses sometimes, and even concrete, could add to radiant heat. The Stevenson box where the thermometer's at, that's placed in a white box, and it's usually 4 feet above an open field. So that can really account for the differences, and that's why your thermometer sometimes maybe a little bit warmer than what the official reading is. We'll have the rest of your forecast and some high temperatures coming up in a few more minutes.
All right, thank you, Bob. As we first told you last night, plans to demolish the grandstands at METRAPARK are now on hold as the Montana Racehorse Owners Association seeks an injunction to try and slow down the project. District Judge Rod Souza set a hearing in the case for next Tuesday. The horse racing group contends Yellowstone County commissioners failed to consider the historical value of the aging facility when demolition plans were approved this past February. At that time, the cost to refurbish the grandstands was estimated at more than $20 million, while demolishing the structure would cost $700,000. It's been 9 years since horse racing took place at Yellowstone Downs. County Commissioner John Ostlund told Q2 News today that while he loves horse racing, the revenue picture to support the 71-year-old facility no longer exists. Dan Fuchs with the Racehorse Owners said his group believes the project could qualify for federal grants that could help offset the cost to taxpayers. Well, as calls take place across our nation to defund police forces over use of force incidents, tonight we check up on a claim made by Billings Police that race-based policing does not happen here in Billings. Tonight, the department opens up by releasing data to back up its claim. Here's MTN Chief Investigative Reporter Andrea Lutz.
No justice! As protests erupt across the nation demanding justice for Black lives, in Billings, a similar sight just weeks ago.
They're there to express their freedom of speech, and we were there to protect it, regardless of how it made them feel or us feel.
Police officers across the country are taking part in a delicate dance, as cameras nowadays are always rolling.
You gonna let him keep his hand on his neck, bro?
I know that when the general public sees that video, they look at it and they see that that's wrong.
The man ain't moved yet.
And when I look at that from a law enforcement perspective, I see that video and I see lots of things that are wrong with it, and I kind of see the underlying reasons.
Lieutenant Brandon Wooley with the Billings Police Department is taking a firm stand on something he says is largely perceived in our community: officers enforcing based on race.
This department is not engaged in racial bias policing. We are not consistently using excessive force in any group or category. We police ourselves, and we have policies and practices set up to continually improve upon to be a professional organization.
So MTN Investigates is checking up on those claims. In 2019, Billings Police arrested over 4,000 individuals. 58% of those arrests involve people who are white, 28% are Native Americans, and 5% Black individuals. And much of the work officers do, according to Wooley, is reactive policing. not proactive, something best tracked through traffic stops. In 2019, 78% of traffic stops were with white individuals, 9% involved Native Americans, and 3% involved blacks.
We take every complaint that comes to us seriously. If we are made aware of a complaint, even third party, about unconstitutional or racial bias in our department, we investigate those immediately.
Data shows of the 192 complaints made against officers in 2019, 101 were department initiated.
Our department internally initiates and sustains more complaints against its officer from internal complaints than it does from external complaints, which is a way of showing that we're policing ourselves.
And when it comes to use of force complaints, the police department is tracking those as well. In 2019, there were 131 use of force reports tracked within the department. 59% of those reports involved someone who is white, 27% involved a Native American individual, and 5% involved someone who is black. Those numbers closely aligning with the diverse makeup of our community as it correlates to police interactions based on arrests.
Our officers are human. They're going to make mistakes. We've made mistakes in the past. And as much as we want to say that we're going to be perfect and that never happen again, it's likely that we're going to make mistakes again in the future.
Billings Police does an official review of its code of conduct every year. It was most recently done in May. The police brutality video of George Floyd occurred on May 25th. Police departments across the nation are currently under a microscope for how they handle use of force calls and whether those calls are connected to race. Billings is no different.
Racial bias policing is absolutely not allowed. One, it's illegal, and it's not allowed in our department. And so we've also said that in policy, but what that says is the department is saying that these are our goals, these are our missions, these are what we work by, this is what we hold you accountable to. And in multiple different areas we talk about bias-based policing is not allowed. It's not tolerated by the department.
The department's not required by law to track these numbers. Wooley says they do it anyway. And he maintains that despite a feeling otherwise, Billings Police is transparent in its enforcement.
I think there's an overall mindset in this organization that we are members of this community. We're here to protect, we're here to serve, and that transparency is important.
I did ask the police department about the use of chokeholds. They say they don't use them. In fact, they're not in policy and they're not authorized for officers to use. But that being said, a chokehold or a vascular neck restraint is not prohibited either, meaning if the officer feels he needs to use it, then he'll use it. In Billings, Andrea Lutz, MTN Investigates.
All right, thank you, Andrea. And Billings Police also tell Andrea that years ago the department adopted the 8 can't wait use of force policies. Those include things like intervention, the ban on shooting at moving vehicles, warning people before shooting, and comprehensive reporting. Still to come on the MTM News at 10 here on Q2, a mask debate. An early morning public health meeting in Gallatin County comes to a screeching halt due to an angry crowd. We'll take you there. And in sports, we say hello again to our athletes of the week who are continuing their globe-trotting basketball adventure even through the pandemic.